Chapter 17. The Hidden Room. Darting into the house, Nancy hurried back to the attic. "Learn anything?" Mr. March asked. "Oh, yes!" Breathlessly, she told him of her find. "I never knew of any hidden room," he exclaimed. "But come to think of it, Phipp would disappear for hours at a time. We didn't know where he was, and he never told us anything, so we didn't ask. Perhaps your son found the room and kept it a secret for his music. Let's move the wardrobe and investigate." Nancy and Mr. March found it was too heavy for them to budge, so Nancy went off to summon Effie from her supper preparations. "We need a strong pusher," she told the maid. Effie grinned. "I can oblige," she said. "What's on your mind?" "Furniture moving." By working together, the three finally succeeded in shifting the massive oak wardrobe a few more inches. Susan, who had come upstairs, watched with deep interest. Suddenly, she clapped her hands and began to dance around excitedly. "There it is! A door with a peephole in the wall!" "Sure you're born it is," Effie agreed, staring in astonishment. "I wouldn't have believed it. Yet there seems to be all kinds of funny things going on around here." The door was a crude homemade affair, evidently built by someone with little skill in carpentry or craftsmanship. "Phipp must have put that in himself, the rascal." Mr. March chuckled. "He was always tinkering." Nancy unbolted the door and pushed with all her strength. It refused to give. "That's queer," said Mr. March. "Let me try it." He had no better success than Nancy. Effie also tried, but to no avail. "It must be bolted on the other side," she said. "In that case, we'll never be able to get in." Many thoughts flashed through Nancy's mind. The strange musical notes and rapping sounds she had heard must have come from beyond this locked door. With no apparent opening to the place from the old servants' quarters, how did anyone get inside? Effie whispered hoarsely, "I'll bet there's a ghost beyond there. Please leave it alone. Don't let it out. No telling what it'll do to us." The remark brought Nancy back to reality. She was provoked that the maid had spoken, for her statement had frightened Susan. The child clung to Nancy. "Effie, go downstairs and take Susan with you," Nancy said, rather severely. "There are no such things as ghosts, and you know it. Mr. March and I will continue the work alone." The maid, somewhat embarrassed, took the child by the hand and went to the second floor. Although Nancy had declared there could not be a ghost beyond the locked door, she was apprehensive as to what they might find. "Shall we break the door down?" she asked Mr. March. He nodded. Together they pushed against the door. Suddenly there was a splintering sound, and the barricade gave way. Nancy and Mr. March fell forward. There was no floor beyond the door. Man and girl pitched into space. For a second, Nancy thought she had hurtled to the outdoors. But suddenly, with Mr. March beside her, she crashed onto something hard. The two, their breath knocked from them, lay still for a few moments. Then Nancy roused herself. "Are you all right?" she asked, getting up and helping Mr. March to rise. "Yes," he panted. "Guess we missed some steps." The candlelight was still visible at a distance, but most of its beam was cut off by the massive wardrobe. As Nancy's eyes became accustomed to the dimness, she groped toward the doorway of the attic to retrieve the light. She found 3 steps leading from the secret room to the attic and climbed up. Effie was standing there, trembling. I heard a crash, she began. Everything's all right, Nancy assured her. Mr. March and I had a fall, but we weren't hurt. Just a few bruises. Thank goodness, Effie cried. Oh my, you could have killed yourselves. Did you find anything? Not yet. We'll let you know as soon as we do. Effie went downstairs again. Nancy got the candle and returned to the secret room. Her first thought was to find out how the person who had bolted the door from the inner side had gained access to the room. Nothing showed up until she looked above her. A skylight, she said aloud, and played the candle on the low-arched ceiling. Look, Mr. March, it has been entirely covered with a large black cloth. A person could step in and out of that window easily, Mr. March remarked. The fellow put the dark cloth over it to keep anyone from seeing a light in here. And come to think of it, Phipp often went to his bedroom early. Probably he came up here instead of going to bed. Nancy was not entirely sure the elderly man was correct in his surmise about the skylight being the entrance. There was no evidence outdoors that an intruder could possibly gain access to the steep roof without a long ladder. And that certainly would have been noticed, Nancy thought. She and Mr. March searched for another opening, but were unable to find one. Nancy had to conclude that Mr. March's theory probably was correct, yet a strong hunch told her it was not. Now let's look for Phipp's music, said Mr. March. The only pieces of furniture in the room were a small antique piano desk and a drawerless table. Nancy inquired if Mr. March had ever seen them before. Yes, long ago, he replied, but I seem to recall that they stood along a wall in the attic at that time. Nancy began to examine the unusual piano desk, feeling that if Phipp's music were hidden any place, it would be there. Lightly, she struck a few of the yellowed keys, and then her heart sank. These harp-like notes are the very ones I heard the other day, she exclaimed. Are you sure? Mr. March asked. Positive. To herself, Nancy said, I'm afraid the intruder knew the secret of this old attic and has found all the music. One by one, the songs will be published, and there won't be a scrap of evidence to bring suit against the thief. The one clue we found under the wallpaper on the staircase won't help us much. Mr. March shared her feeling of discouragement as they pulled out one drawer after another of the piano desk. They contained nothing. Perhaps there's a secret drawer under the keys, said Nancy, taking heart suddenly. Those musical notes I heard may be part of some special combination that's used to open a hidden compartment. Didn't you say you heard rapping sounds as well? Mr. March reminded her. Maybe you have to rap on something while you strike the notes. But what's the use of bothering if all the music is gone? We don't know that all of it is gone, Nancy told the elderly man. Maybe the thief was only experimenting, just as we are, and didn't find the combination. Nancy tried to imitate the sounds exactly as she had heard them. Again and again she played the musical notes, while rapping first on one part, then another of the wooden framework with her free hand. She was just about to give up when a drawer shot out just above the piano keys. End of chapter 17.